The storm was brewing outside, but inside the airplane the real turbulence was about to begin. The flight was departing from Paris bound for Ouagadougou, and among the passengers few could imagine that this journey would witness an episode that would put the values of respect, dignity and justice to the test. In row 12C, seated by the window, was a man with a calm gaze, simple clothes and a serene expression. He wore a modest African shirt, his shoulders relaxed, and his face carried the tranquility of someone who knows the weight of the world but refuses to be crushed by it. This was Ibrahim Traoré, president of Burkina Faso. But on that morning, he bore no insignia, no suit, no entourage. He traveled alone like any ordinary citizen. He sought no privileges. He was there for a greater purpose, to understand firsthand the struggles of his people, to feel in his own skin what many Africans experience when crossing borders: prejudice, humiliation, the sidelong glance. Next to him, an elderly woman struggled to stow her carry-on in the overhead compartment. The flight attendant, a young woman with European features and hurried manners, approached with impatience. Without asking, she snatched the bag from the woman's hands and shoved it in with force, as if handling a useless burden. Traoré stood up calmly. "Can I help with that?" he said in a low voice. The flight attendant turned with a sharp look. "Sir, please sit down. You've already caused enough trouble, let me handle it." And without waiting for a response, she turned her back. The elderly woman thanked Traoré with her eyes. He simply smiled and sat down. But that was just the beginning. During the flight, the same flight attendant named Elise displayed clear signs of impatience with the African passengers. She ignored requests, spoke harshly, and cast disdainful looks disguised as professionalism. Traoré observed everything in silence. His gaze pierced the environment like that of a tranquil lion that already knew the jungle inside out. He knew that his mission there was to endure, to understand, and, if necessary, to act. As she passed with the beverage cart, Elise stopped abruptly in front of him. "What do you want?" she said, without even looking into his eyes. "Just a glass of water, please," Traoré replied. She let out a heavy sigh, grabbed the glass roughly, and practically threw it onto the tray table in front of him. The water splashed. Some nearby passengers looked on in shock, but Traoré, he just smiled. His smile was not one of submission, but of someone waiting for the right moment. Beside him, a passenger recognized him. It was a young Burkinabe student, returning from Belgium after completing his master's degree. His eyes widened. He approached slowly and whispered, "Mr. President, is it really you?" Traoré placed a finger to his lips. "Here, I'm just a brother traveling. Keep this secret until we land, all right?" The young man nodded, visibly moved. His eyes filled with tears. He knew this was not just a president sitting there. He was a symbol of courage. Hours later, during the meal service, the tension reached its peak. Traoré received a tray without utensils. He politely asked, "Excuse me, could you bring me some utensils?" Elise shot him an icy glare. "You didn't get any. You should pay more attention." "I didn't receive any, indeed," he responded with the same calm. She huffed. "I'll see if there are any left. But next time be more careful, all right?" The indignation of nearby passengers grew. A woman from Ivory Coast stood up and spoke loudly. "This is racism. You've been treating this man with disrespect from the start." The flight attendant pretended not to hear. She continued on her way. But at that moment, something shifted in the cabin. Traoré remained seated, but there was a quiet fire in his eyes. It wasn't anger. It was truth. A truth that sooner or later would break like thunder. Minutes later, the aircraft's captain appeared in the aisle. He was accompanied by a crew member who had been informed of the situation by another African flight attendant who had been watching the scene from a distance in uncomfortable silence. The captain approached Traoré, confused. "Excuse me, is it true what I'm hearing, that there was an issue with our crew?" Before Traoré could respond, the young student who had recognized the president stood up. With a firm and emotional voice, he said, "This man is the president of my country. He's being humiliated in this cabin as if he were nothing, and yet he remains calm like a king among men." Total silence fell over the plane. The flight attendant, Elise, paled. "What? President? That's not possible. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't look like—" Traoré stood up slowly. "What did you expect a president to look like?" he asked in a deep yet serene voice. "Can a black man in simple clothes not carry honor?" His words rang out like bells in a cathedral. I'm not here as a head of state. I'm here as an African, as a son of a land that is still judged today by the appearance of its children. But dignity doesn't wear a suit. It wears truth. Emotions swept over the passengers. Some applauded. Others wept silently. The elderly woman clasped her hands to her chest, as if witnessing justice being restored before her eyes. The captain, visibly embarrassed, addressed Traoré. "Sir, on behalf of the airline, I apologize for our employees' behavior. We will take the necessary measures." But Traoré interrupted him. "I don't want vengeance, I want change. Let this young woman understand the value of every human being. Let no one else have to prove they are worthy of respect." He turned to Elise. "You don't need to kneel, but you need to look into people's eyes and see their humanity." She, in tears, could only nod and whisper, I'm so sorry." And then, when the plane landed in Ouagadougou, hundreds of passengers disembarked with a new perspective, because they had witnessed something rare, a strength that doesn't shout, but transforms. The sun was rising in Ouagadougou as the plane's tires touched the ground. A dense heat rose from the asphalt, as if the earth were breathing alongside the people. The stairs were positioned. The captain insisted on holding the door, and in an unexpected gesture turned to Traoré and said, "Sir, it would be an honor to let you disembark first." But the president merely smiled and replied, "The honor lies in serving. Let the elderly disembark first. Then I'll go." The flight attendant, Elise, still visibly shaken, remained at the back of the aircraft, silently observing the man she had just confronted and learned from, not through shouting, but through dignity. Outside, a small government team waited discreetly. No one wore ornate uniforms. There were no fluttering flags or red carpets. That was Traoré's way, simplicity and strength. When his feet touched African soil, an agent approached and discreetly handed him a folder. "The reports are here, sir, and the press already knows what happened during the flight." "How?" he asked, surprised. "The video, sir. Someone recorded it. It's going viral. It's already surpassed 1 million views." Traoré sighed. "That wasn't the intention, but perhaps it was providence," said the aide. "The people are seeing who you are, even when no one is watching." Hours later, the video was circulating across the continent. "The humble president," some called him. "The African royalty that wears no crown," others commented. The scene where he stood to help the elderly woman, the way he responded with firmness and peace to the flight attendant, his speech inside the plane, all became a symbol, not of power, but of something far rarer, honor. In Paris, Elise was suspended by the airline, but not with public punishment. After the incident, she had sought out the management herself. "I don't need to be suspended. I need to learn. I want to visit this man's country. I want to look into the eyes of the people he represents and understand." Traoré's response, when he learned of this, was even more surprising. He didn't demand her dismissal. He requested that she be sent as a volunteer for 1 month to a social program in Burkina Faso. Let her see, let her serve. That's how change begins. 2 days later, Elise arrived in Ouagadougou. She was welcomed without cameras, without formal reception, just with outstretched hands from women who took her to a community center in Bobo-Dioulasso, where children studied under trees and mothers learned to read together around a clay table. There, for the first time, she saw, not with her eyes, but with her heart. "You don't need to understand everything, but you need to listen," said the center's coordinator, a woman named Aminata. "We cry too. We dream too. We love too." And Elise wept. She washed her face with tears she hadn't known she could shed. She sat on the ground with the children, taught English, learned African French, cooked with the women, and listened to stories of struggle and faith. Meanwhile, Traoré gathered his cabinet. Something bigger was happening, and he knew it. The incident on the plane revealed an open wound, the silent prejudice that still surrounded the African continent. But he didn't want to merely protest. He wanted to propose. "Let's launch a continental campaign," he said, "not against anyone, but in favor of dignity." The project was named Look Again, a movement to make the world turn its eyes to Africa, not with pity, but with respect. Videos, schools, cultural exchanges, training for airlines, hotels, and diplomatic institutions. The message was clear. No one should be judged by their clothes, their skin, or their passport. Amid all this, Elise, now transformed, requested to meet the president once more. He agreed. It was a brief meeting in a quiet garden under an ancient mango tree. She arrived with downcast eyes and trembling hands. "I didn't come to ask for forgiveness. I came to thank you. Because you didn't react as I deserved. You reacted as the world needed to see." Traoré smiled. "Sometimes it's in silence that revolutions begin." She hesitated. "Can I stay? Not as a visitor, but as someone who wants to serve." "You've already started," he replied. "Now you just need to keep going." And so something rare happened. A woman who arrived with prejudice chose to stay with purpose. Meanwhile, the international repercussions grew. African leaders commented on Traoré's gesture. Presidents of other countries sent messages of support. And for the first time, a proposal was put forward at the United Nations by a bloc of African countries demanding a review of international training protocols for companies operating in global South countries. The proposal was named the Ubuntu Code, inspired by the African concept, "I am because we are." During the same period, Ibrahim Traoré was invited to speak at a forum on international relations and equal treatment. He took the stage without a prepared speech, just a heart full of conviction. "I didn't come here to tell a story about a plane. I came to remind you that for every person ignored in an aisle, a story is being trampled. That humility must not be mistaken for weakness, and that respect is not given to a title. It is given to a human being." The audience fell silent. Then a wave of applause echoed, not just through their ears, but through the souls present, because everyone understood that what they saw in that viral video was merely a reflection of what the entire world needs: humanity. Back in Burkina Faso, the streets now spoke with pride. "Traoré is our Mandela," the youth said. "He doesn't shout. He teaches by example." In a public school in the countryside, children performed the plane scene as a play. A 9-year-old boy played Traoré. When the flight attendant mistreated him, he didn't respond with anger. He simply said, "Respect isn't bought, it's earned." And the parents, seated in the makeshift audience of wooden benches, stood to applaud. On national television, reporters noted that over 12 countries had adopted parts of the Ubuntu Code, and airlines now showed institutional videos highlighting the importance of dignified treatment for all passengers, regardless of origin. In the last week of that month, Elise was invited to speak at the University of Ouagadougou. She took the podium timidly but confidently. "I came to teach about service, but I was taught about humanity." She paused, looking at the students. "And if I, who came from a world that looks down, was welcomed with love, why can't you, who live with your feet on the ground, teach the world to look with the heart?" The audience applauded, and that day, many realized that the true strength of a nation lies not in weapons, nor in gold, nor in treaties. It lies in the ability to forgive, to transform and to uplift those who offend us, not with harsh words but with the weight of silent truth. On the final day of his commitment in Ouagadougou, Ibrahim Traoré stood before a crowd awaiting him in the city center. It wasn't an official event. There were no prepared speeches or newspapers to record the moment. It was just the people, those he had sworn to protect and serve. But that day was special. He knew that this moment, without cameras or protocols, was the pinnacle of something far greater than any policy or proposal. The square was packed. Hundreds of people, youth, elderly, workers, mothers, children, all gathered for something simple. A meeting of eyes, a moment of sharing. They came to see their leader, but more than that, they came to feel that someone finally saw them. Traoré stepped onto the small makeshift stage with serene calm, but his heart was racing. He knew the weight of the moment. He knew that before him stood the reflection of what his people faced every day: disrespect, exclusion, and struggle. He hadn't come to deliver promises. He had come to deliver something deeper, a pact of humanity, a vision of a future where everyone has a place without exception. With a simple gesture, he called for silence. Then he spoke, with the same calm that had accompanied him on the flight, but now with an intensity that touched the soul of everyone present. "Today I don't come as a president. I come as a man who also cries with you. Cries for our land, for our struggle, and most importantly, cries for our humanity." The crowd grew still. Each of his words seemed to penetrate deeper, touching a place within every person. Traoré continued, "I know that often we look to the future and see only challenges, but what makes us strong, what unites us, is not the difficulties, it's our choices. Each of us has the power to decide how we will respond to them, how we will treat others, how we will act in the face of pain, humiliation, and fear. He paused and looked to the horizon, as if seeing the future he so desperately desired, a continent united by peace, justice, and equality. I saw what happened on a flight, a man like any other. And I saw how the dignity of each person can be wounded in a moment of weakness, but I also saw how dignity can be restored, even in the most difficult situations. I saw this not with words, but with actions. I saw how peace can be achieved when we look at each other with respect. The crowd was utterly silent. No one dared interrupt. These weren't just empty words. It was a call, a silent yet powerful cry for a better future. That's what we need. No more empty words. No more promises made without action. We need to act. We need to be the change we want to see in the world. And I know we can do it. Together, as a nation, as a people. The sun's heat was intense, but no one seemed to feel it. The energy there was palpable. People looked at each other, feeling the collective strength beginning to emerge. Traoré continued, I am no more a president than any of you. I am not greater or more important. We are all equal, all fighting for the same thing, the right to live with dignity. When he finished, something unexpected happened. A man in the crowd, a simple worker, stood and began to clap. Slowly, others joined in. Not as a formality, but as a sincere expression of recognition. Recognition that his words were not just words, they were a reflection of something greater that was growing there. And then, Traoré did something even more surprising. He stepped down from the stage and mingled with the crowd. There were no more barriers, no security around him. He walked among his people, feeling the energy of each one. He shook hands, embraced some, smiled, and spoke with an open heart. He was no longer just the president. He was the leader of a people who, for the first time, were beginning to believe that change was possible. That night, Traoré sat alone in his office, looking out the window. The city's sounds were quieting. He knew the country was changing. But he also knew there was still much to do. What happened on that flight was not just an isolated incident. It was the tip of the iceberg of a larger problem, a problem he was determined to confront with all his strength. I didn't come to be a figurehead leader, he said to himself softly. I came to lead with soul, and if need be, I'll fight until my last breath to ensure my people never feel small again. He stood, walked to the window, and looked at the stars. And in that moment, he knew that true leadership wasn't in grand political decisions. It was in the small daily actions, in respect, in dignity, and in love for others. The future lay before him, and he was no longer afraid. The days that followed brought many changes to the country. The Look Again project was widely embraced not only in Burkina Faso, but in other African countries that began adopting the Ubuntu Code. Companies started revising their service policies. A new legislation was proposed to ensure that equality and respect were integral to international relations. Ibrahim Traoré's story was no longer just the story of an African president. It was the story of a man who dared to do what many feared to try: teach the world to look at Africa with respect, with dignity, and above all, with humanity. In the end, Elise's words, now a defender of the Ubuntu Code, echoed in his mind. You didn't give me a lesson, you gave me a new life. And that, perhaps, was Ibrahim Traoré's greatest legacy. Not just changing a country, but changing the world, starting with the people around him.